Greetings and welcome. My name is Jack and this is a beginner's guide for Pathfinder's 2nd edition, where we try to learn a class by theory crafting a build from level 1 to level 20. Today we are dealing with the monk, and as always we are going to start with a brief class overview, then I'm going to present the general concept of the build, and then I'm going to describe the build from level 1 to level 20. I'm going to then end this video with a damage projection from the monk, showing how our damage evolves throughout our levels. If you would like to learn more about the monk class, check out these guides: X Dragon Punch, the Merciless Guide to the Monk, Monk Stands Up, a Pathfinder 2nd edition guide by Nick Haru, and RPG Bot's Monk Handbook. With that being said, let's get straight into the class overview. The monk is a very peculiar class. It's a martial character which derives its powers from within. Meditation, knowledge of its own body, inner balance, and all these kind of things. It usually specialized in unarmed combat, although there are some particular monks that use weapons. It is famous for not wearing armor and being incredibly fast, and also having some weird powers like the ability to run through walls, to ignore the effects of aging, and to draw from their inner strength through the use of a resource called ki, which in different editions is implemented in various ways through different rules. So monks are these oriental masters of martial arts, and they usually fulfill this very specific and niche fantasy, although there is certainly space for monks to cover other character concepts. There is a special place in my heart for monks because the monk is the first class I ever played in D&D, and of course I had no idea of what I was doing, so I died on my second session, and then I spent the rest of my campaign just watching the other players playing, so it wasn't the best experience. But what drew me to the monk was its uniqueness and how special some of his abilities, like the ability to converse with any living being or the ability to avoid aging, these all looked very unique and interesting from a role-playing perspective. Unfortunately, in 5th edition D&D, monks have a very bad reputation and they are considered one of the, if not the worst class in the game. And the reason for that is that they end up not being exceptional at the things that you would expect them to be good at. So they look like they should be good scouts and good stealthy characters, but they are not really that good at that. From a damage point of view, they lag behind most other martial classes. They don't have feats that support their preferred fighting style. They have survivability issues. They are very multiple attribute dependent. And the worst offender of all is that they are tied to this unique key resource, which is scarce and hard to recharge, and is tied to basically most of their actions. So every time they want to do something unique or cool, they have to spend this resource, so they end up running out very quickly. And then what ends up happening is that the monk doesn't really do much. So it's a bit disappointing. In comparison to all these issues, monks in Pathfinder 2nd edition look a lot better. The first thing that jumps to your eyes immediately is how good their armor proficiency is. They have the same armor proficiency as champions, only while champions get it for heavy armor, they get expert proficiency in unarmored defense, and this proficiency scales and is always one step ahead with regards to all other martials except champions. So monks may be excellent tanks just like champions. As far as their fighting style, their class obviously support unarmed fighting. They get periodic features that increase the effectiveness of their unarmed attacks. They also get a very flavorful feature, which is the path to perfection. Monks are famous for having good saving throws in previous edition, although this is not true in 5th edition, they're not special in that way. But in 2nd edition, in Pathfinder 2nd edition, they get the path to perfection feature, which allows them to customize their saving throw. They are the only class who can do that, and so you can literally choose the saving throw you prefer, or that you think is going to be more relevant in your campaign, and max it out to legendary. So this is a very unique customization option that the monk has. Interestingly, the monk does not have any subclasses baked into the class, so it's only defined by the feats and the feats chains that you will choose. In particular, I think that what acts as a subclass for your monk is your first level feat choice, and in particular your stance choice. At first level, you can choose a stance, and you are probably not going to use multiple stances unless you are a very high level or you make a stance master kind of character. So in a way, the stance you choose is a subclass because it defines your fighting style, and it might even be a nice starting point for your character concept. Why is my monk fighting with a dragon stance or a tiger stance? Where did they learn this? What does assuming this stance mean for them? So answering all these questions can already help you filling out and fleshing out your character. Monks also get periodic increases to their movement speed, which seems a lot more relevant in a system like Pathfinder than it would be in a system like D&D, because movement is a lot more restrictive in Pathfinder since it costs an action and it doesn't just happen automatically. So having movement increases is very beneficial. And of course, the most characteristic feature of the monk is again something they get right at level 1, and it's the feature Flurry of Blows, which I featured in previous videos where I took it as an archetype feat. It really says a lot that this feature is only available through archetypes starting from level 10. So it is so powerful that you really have to wait to be high-ish level, in order to be able to steal it with archetypes. Only monks get it in the early game. If we compare this feat with another feat which I featured previously, which is Double Slice. Double Slice is about increasing your chances to hit. So it reduces the multiple attack penalties. Flurry of Blows does not reduce the multiple attack penalty. Your second strike will be at a -5 or -4 if you're using an agile weapon. It also has the Flourish trait. You can use it only once per turn, and you cannot combine it with other actions which have the Flourish trait. And the real power of Flurry of Blows is in its action cost. It only costs 1, so it is an action efficiency feat. So it basically gives you an action for free. And this is the recurring theme and really the class identity, I would say, of the monk. It's action efficiency. More so than unarmed fighting, more so than unarmored defense mastery. What the monk is a class that can do a lot of actions, a flurry of actions, if you will, in a turn. If you look at things like Flurry of Blows or the fact that they get extra movement means that eventually they might be able to move twice as much with one action than a character who does not have access to incredible movement. So in a way, it's as if their one move action is actually turning into 2 actions. Many of the feats of the monk work in a similar fashion, and giving them free actions or increasing the efficiency of what they do action-wise. And this seems like a very impactful characteristic for a class to have in a game which all revolves around action economy. Being the action economy cheater is very appealing. This all comes together with the classical monk feats, so wall running, water running, and the other spiritual effects, which actually scale throughout the character progression because there are feats at high level that supports stuff like key powers that keep them relevant as your character increases in power. So the monk looks like a class which is packed full of treats. And for monk fans that come from 5th edition, this might really scratch that monk itch which Dungeons & Dragons might have left dissatisfied. With that being said, what do I plan to do with this class? As I said, for the monk, the thing that really captured my attention is how the class is built around action efficiency. So it's a class that's probably going to be left wanting for actions. I can do all my melee routine, and then I'm left with many actions and many more things that I can potentially do. So the first question I want to answer with this build is, okay, what do I do with the extra actions that this class grants me? And a very good answer for that is, well, I can finally feature a very powerful archetype that so far I have not touched because, well, for several reasons, but most importantly because I felt that if I start using it, then I will use it in every single build. And I'm talking about the Beastmaster archetype, which is an archetype that gives you access to an animal companion. Animal companions are very powerful assets for low-level characters. They give you an extra body on the battlefield. They allow you to choose between a number of different animals to accompany you. And these animals can assist you in combat using their strikes and also using a unique support action, which is different between different animal types. And it can vary from demoralizing creatures, as is the case for the ape, or adding damage to your strikes, as is the case for the bear. So having an extra body on the battlefield and having extra actions on the battlefield looks like completely broken, especially in a tight system as Pathfinder. What's keeping this in check is the fact that the animal companions have the minion trait, which means they don't get 3 actions. In fact, they don't get any actions unless you spend an action to command them. This, however, turns your command action into 2 actions that the animal companion can use to strike, stride, use their support action, and so on. Another issue of the animal companions is that their scaling is not automatic. You need to keep investing periodically into feats to keep their power level up to standard. There are feats that increase their stats, feats that give them extra abilities, and all these feats are essential to keep them survivable and relevant in combat. Their damage is nowhere near the damage of a martial character, and they drain actions from you, but they contribute in combat, and they can help you with other tasks such as, for example, flanking. At higher levels, animal companions eventually fall off. Their survivability becomes low and their contribution damage-wise becomes paltry. So their impact at low level is certainly way stronger than it is at the end of your character progression. And so you might end up with a lot of feats invested into a feature that at the end of your career is not that good. But I think that the power that animal companions give at the beginning of the game, and the early game is realistically the biggest part of your campaigns, is high enough that it justifies taking an animal companion. And in fact, in a game with multiple archetypes, I think it is very hard to resist the temptation not to take an animal companion with every single character who can with their first archetype feats, and eventually retrain out of it if you really don't want to keep the pet. So this is a temptation I've resisted thus far, but commanding an animal companion is an action that you can undertake with a monk thanks to the action availability that the class has. And having a companion in combat that can help you with, for example, flanking or maybe athletics actions, or maybe divert some attacks away from you, is certainly a valuable asset for your monk. So what kind of character would be a martial arts expert who runs around with a pet? Well, there are many character concepts that can meet these requisites, so I needed a bit more details to refine who the character was. So I started taking into consideration the ancestry for my class, and what I wanted for my ancestry is a way to enlarge myself. Again, the monk doesn't have this innately, so I think gaining higher reach for my attacks would be even more beneficial. If the enemy has to use actions to come closer to me, and I don't because I'm larger, I again win at the action economy game. So this time, among all the different ancestries that could have given me access to increased reach, I chose the beast skin, which eventually allows you to enlarge yourself at will. And so I decided to make a character who is half feral and is followed by a pet animal companion. So somebody who fights with teeth and claws just like the animal who accompanies them. The last decision that I made while theory crafting the character is to go dexterity instead of strength. This is typically associated with lower damage because you become more multiple attribute dependent and you can only max one stat. So if you use strength, then strength is used to hit and to deal damage. So everything works nicely. If you use dexterity, then strength still applies to your damage. So you are splitting your stats, which results in a lower overall damage per round. What you do gain from it is higher armor class, higher initiative, and all the benefits that higher dexterity gives you. So it will be interesting to see if our action efficiency and our animal companion allow us to compensate with the drawbacks of having dexterity instead of strength as a primary stat. So can we compensate the damage loss that we got from our characteristic choice through the class features and the archetype features? Let's find out. As I said in the introduction, we are going for a beast skin, but that's just a heritage. we need a humanoid race for our ancestry. And I think human is just a perfect fit, because another thing that we want from our ancestry is extra feats. There are a lot of amazing feats that monk gets, and human is the extra feat ancestry, so it fits perfectly for our build. For the background, I think martial disciple is fitting. I will take the acrobatics since we are a dexterity build. This gives us catfall, which allows us to treat falls as if they were 10 feet shorter, and eventually it makes us immune to fall damage. So very monk-like, and it gives us a reason to bring acrobatics up to legendary. Our heritage, as we said, is going to be the beastkin heritage. This means that the blood of a beast flows through our veins, and we gain attributes of a type of animal that we can choose. This type is relevant because later on we are going to unlock feats that are going to give us attributes of that animal. So we want an animal with good characteristics, so we can make optimal use of our ancestry feats. So while we could choose any animal that looks cool, I think the bat is a very good candidate because it has very good senses and the ability to fly. So we are going to play a Batman who has this bestial taint in his blood and is trying to learn and master his weird metabolism and seeks the path of inner perfection, maybe to get rid of this bestial flaw. For our abilities, human is very versatile. We can choose whatever we want. As we said, dexterity is a stat we are prioritizing, so it should be present in all our boosts. Other stats which are important are constitution and strength. So ultimately, we can start with a 14 in strength, which is not too bad, a 14 in constitution, which helps keep us alive, an 18 in dexterity, which is our primary stat, and then we can choose the mental stat we prefer, and I think I'm going to go with wisdom, mostly for the will saving throws. Although there is an argument with this build to go for charisma, and I'm going to show why in a little while. We get 4 trained skills in addition to acrobatics and law warfare from our background. Athletics is a very obvious choice. We are not the best in strength and we are not the best at athletics action in general, but it is something that we might use now and again, so we might as well be trained in it. We have very high dexterity, so investing into dexterity skills seems reasonable, and stealth is a very powerful dexterity skill. And now there are some skills here that we need as prerequisite for stuff that we are going to take later on. We need nature, because that's a prerequisite for the Beastmaster archetype. And we also need deception. Why do we need that? Well, because for our class feats, we are going to choose a stance that has deception as a requirement. And that stance is Stumbling Stance. This stance gives us a bonus to deception checks to feint, and it also gives us an amazing strike, which is the Stumbling Swing unarmed attack. And this is the only type of strike we can make while we are in this stance. But it is a very powerful strike, so no complaint there. Let's see what it looks like. It deals 1d8 damage, which is the golden standard of one-handed weapons. It also has the agile trait. This means that our second attacks are going to suffer from only a -4 multiple attack penalty instead of -5. And the third attack is going to suffer from a -8 and so on and so forth. It also has the backstabber trait, which means we deal 1 extra damage when flanking the enemy. And this goes up to 2 once the weapon bonus is a +3. Flanking is something that we're going to do very reliably thanks to the presence of our animal companion. It has, of course, the finesse trait, so we can use it with our dexterity instead of our strength to hit, although the damage is still based on strength, so it's not that amazing right now. And then it has the non-lethal and unarmed trait, because it is an unarmed attack after all. So all these things combined make this a very powerful one-handed attack. Now, Stumbling Stance encourages you to go the deception and charisma way, especially because there is a 6th level feat, which is called Stumbling Feint, which allows you to feint basically for free whenever you use Flurry of Blow. So this is one of those action efficiency feats, because it gives you a free action, basically. And this feint is also extra powerful, because it applies the flat-footed condition against both the Flurry of Blow attacks, instead of only one, as Feint would usually do. So it's technically 2 actions in a free action. Very potent. The drawback of this is that it requires you to use a deception action, which is Feint. What the Feint action does is allows you to flat-foot the enemy. With a critical success, you flat-foot it against all the attacks against them until your next round. But with a critical failure, you become flat-footed instead. And this is something to keep in mind because we are a multiple attribute dependent class, and charisma is not really an important attribute for us. Our class DC is based on wisdom, so we are really spread thin. With the stumbling stance, therefore, we have three options: dump wisdom and invest into charisma instead to eventually become good at deception and feinting, or use this feat without proficiency in deception, because eventually you are going to roll high enough to succeed even though you have a low modifier. Perhaps you can get a bit of aid from the assurance feat. Or, and this is the route that I'm taking, we can just ignore this whole deception thing and just be satisfied with the base attack that Stumbling Stance provides. The reason why I'm going this route is that I'm very scared of the critical failure of these feints. We do not want to flatfoot ourselves. And I think that this unarmed strike is a sufficient reason to take the Stumbling Stance on its own without building a character around it. I also think it matches the idea of a Batman. If you've ever seen a bat trapped indoor, they have this sort of stumbling way of flying around, which is quite unpredictable. They almost look drunk. So we can kind of move in that way to confuse our enemies and deliver these powerful strikes. If you want to make the most out of your stance and you don't like the fact that we are neglecting the deception part of the stumbling stance, there are of course a plethora of stances you can take instead into this build. You could go for the wolf stance if you like tripping, or you could go with stances that grant you, lots of extra actions eventually, like the stoked flame stance, or you could go for a defensive stance like the crane stance. But I really like this attack and I want to use it as much as possible. I think it's very efficient damage wise, so I am content with taking the stance just for this feature. We then get our ancestry feat and immediately the human is going to pay off dividends. We can take one of the best, if not the best, ancestry feats at level 1, and that is natural ambition. Why is it so good? Because it allows us to take a class feat instead of an ancestry feat, and class feats are usually better than ancestry feats, especially for the monk, because now we can take Key Strike. This gives us a focus spell right at level 1 with a focus pool. And what Key Strikes does is it allows us to make a supercharged Flurry of Blow, basically. Our Flurry of Blow gains a status bonus to the attack rolls, and the strikes deal an extra 1d6 damage. We can choose if the strike deals force, lawful, if we are lawful, negative or positive damage, so sometimes we might be able to target damage weaknesses. So this is a nice feat, and most importantly, it gives us the focus pool, and this is a prerequisite to access later feats. So it is in a way a feat tax to get some amazing key powers the monk has, and taking it with natural ambition at level 1 makes the burden of taking this feat a little lighter. Since we now have key spells, we can choose whether they are divine or occult spell. This doesn't matter much for the build. I guess this would matter if you were a multi-class build and you somehow had a higher occult spell DC from your main class. Right now, this is just a flavor choice. So I think that since we are bat hybrids, occult matches our character theme well. We get the change shape action as a beastkin. Right now, this gives us an unarmed attack, but it's so much worse than our stumbling stance attack that we are never going to use change shape right now. Eventually, this is an effect that we are going to have on us pretty much permanently, but right now this is a dead feature. It's going to become good later on. The monk class also gives us powerful fists, which increases the damage for our unarmed attack, allows us to use unarmed attacks lethally without taking penalties. The increased damage isn't relevant because our unarmed stumbling swing is better, but the ability to use non-lethal attacks lethally is certainly useful. And this wraps up our level 1, a very full level, as is the case for most martial classes. Let's see how we move on to level 2. Well, an amazing class feat we get right off the bat is Stunning Fist. This is a follow-up feat. It has Flurry of Blows as a prerequisite. And whenever we use our Flurry of Blows against a single target, then we have a chance of stunning that target. Now, the target has to make a fortitude save against our cast DC to avoid this effect. And this is an incapacitation effect, so if the enemy is higher level than us, they are going to treat their degree of success one level higher. So even if they fail, they're going to succeed. So this is not good against bosses. However, what really stands out of this feat is that it's free. It doesn't cost you any resources. It doesn't cost you any additional action. This just happens when you're doing something that you would do anyways, which is Flurry of Blow. You're going to do it every round, basically. and it gives an extra effect and a very powerful effect at one, even if it's unreliable because of the incapacitation effect. This feat is just amazingly good if you're facing a boss. Eventually, your bosses are going to roll ones. It will happen, and if you can stun them, or if you can stun a regular creature 3, which basically denies their next turn, what a powerful asset, and for just a single class feat, something that you can use every time you Flurry of Blows. This is incredible, and right at level 2. We also get our first skill feat, and as usual, I take Assurance here because I think it's a good spot to take Assurance. And the skill I want to use Assurance with is Stealth. We are going for a stealthy, scouty build. As bats, we are probably going to spend a lot of time in the shadows, so it's fitting thematically, and stealth is one of those actions that if we can avoid rolling natural ones, we are probably happier. So I see myself using Assurance with Stealth reasonably often, especially once our proficiency bonuses get high enough. At level 2, we also get our first free archetype, and as we said, we're going to take the Beastmaster dedication. This is a very good dedication because it gives us an animal companion right off the bat. So how do animal companions work? We covered it a bit in the introduction. We can see here that we can get a pet and we can choose what kind of pet we want. They have different characteristics and abilities. It would be very thematic to go for a bat, so we are a bat accompanied by another bat. It has flying speed and a nice support benefit, but unfortunately the bat is just kind of a worse version of the bird. It deals a little bit more damage with its attacks. The support benefits adds additional damage to our attacks, which is persistent bleed damage, and it dazzles the enemy, increasing both our survivability and the survivability of any target of that enemy. The bird being a finesse companion, so a companion with a high dexterity bonus, also means that they're going to have higher defenses, and so they're hopefully going to die less often. If we look at the HP, it is dangerously low for a creature that's going to spend a lot of time in melee. However, thanks to its flying speed, it will hopefully be able to stay out of trouble and still assist us in combat. So, commanding our pet is a great use for our second action. Our third action might be a movement, or, actually this is something that I should have mentioned at level 1. One thing that monks can do in Pathfinder, and this is very strange for somebody coming from Dungeons and Dragons, is that they can use shields. And I would argue that they are better shield users than most classes, including fighters and champions, just because of the fact that they have easily access to the action to raise the shield. So if we Flurry of Blows, then command our animal companions, and we are already in melee reach and we don't need to move, then we can very easily use our third action to raise the shield and increase our armor class. In fact, I'm going to recommend you bring a shield with your monk and always consider raising it, because it's a lower price for them and the benefit is really significant. So while the build we are making right now is not a tank build, this is just a cheap benefit to access, and it has such a powerful effect that it would be foolish not to recommend it. And I think the main reason not to take a shield with the monk is that it doesn't quite fit thematically with the idea of the martial artist. Bruce Lee was not wielding shields after all, but mechanically it's very powerful and it should not be neglected. So this concludes our level 2. Let's move on to level 3. As I said, stealth is something we are going to try and capitalize on, so let's increase it. This also means that our stealth modifier is higher than our perception modifier, and so we can try and use stealth for initiative to get a bonus. Speaking of bonuses to initiative, our general feat is, as usual, going to incredible initiative. We also get incredible movement, which is a plus 10 foot status bonus to our speed whenever we are not wearing armor, which is always. This is the equivalent of the first level long strider spell, but it's always on. And it scales up. The more we level up, eventually we're going to be able to take 2 move actions for the price of 1 because of this high movement speed. Again, action economy, action efficiency is the core of what the monk is trying to do. We also get Mystic Strikes, which make our unarmed attacks magical for the purpose of overcoming damage resistances. At level 4, we get our Attack of Opportunity class feat, which is called Stand Still. This is a bit worse than the fighter's Attack of Opportunity. It only triggers when creatures within reach use a move action or are leaving a square during a move action. but it has the added benefit of interrupting that movement action if we crit. So movement actions are probably going to be the most frequent triggers of opportunity attacks. So it's not that much worse, and it is still a very important damage increase, so we will take it without hesitation. The archetype feat at level 4 is taken, and it's almost compulsory if you go for animal companions, and it is Mature Beastmaster Companion. This gives a free action to our companion every turn, so our companion can do something even if we don't command it. Paradoxically, this is making our command action worse, because first it was generating 2 actions, now it's just generating 1. However, if we don't command at all, our character basically has now 4 actions every turn, and these are monk actions, so very efficient actions. This also grows our animal companion up, giving them additional capabilities. So a better stat distribution. It has a quite impressive 18 in dexterity right now, although the hit points and armor class are still kind of low-ish. We get a skill feat, and since we are now expert in stealth, we can take Quiet Allies. This is a feat which, when we move as a group, allows us to make a single stealth check at the lowest modifier instead of rolling for each and every one of our allies. Now, how does this feat work? On first sight, it looks bad because it means we don't get to roll with our amazing stealth modifier, but we always have to roll with the crappy champion -5 stealth modifier, which is depressing. However, it's not that bad really, because this feat triggers when the said horrible clanky fighter or champion is following the expert. This means that they become trained in that skill where they are untrained, basically. So they get to add their level to the associated skill check. And you can bet your ass that the champion is not going to be trained in stealth. And they're also going to gain a nice circumstance bonus based on our proficiency. Right now it's a +2, and later on it's going to go up to +4. So we are buffing their horrible skill check by a bit. It's still not going to be as good as ours, but instead of rolling 5 skill check, among which 1 is terrible and the others are okay and our is amazing, with the chances of maybe rolling a 1 on the amazing check and still failing, we get to roll only once. It's not a great roll, but it's statistically way better than making all these rolls with some of them being terrible. So this is an auto-pick feat, a very powerful one, and one that makes your entire party stealthy and reduces the issue of heavy armor characters spoiling the fun for quiet and stealthy characters. We get to level 5 and we get our first ability boosts, and we're going to stick to the skills we chose at level 1, so strength, constitution, dexterity, and wisdom. We also get another skill increase, and we might as well increase acrobatics. We also get an ancestry feat, and here we can start going into the beastkin and take greater animal sense. This does not have animal sense as a prerequisite, and it allows us to gain one of the advanced senses of our inherent animals. Since we wisely chose the bat, we can gain echolocations imprecise within 30 feet. So we can know if there are invisible enemies, we know where they are, just like bats. We also get expert proficiency in our attacks, as you would expect from a martial class at level 5, and we get better proficiency in perception. At level 6, we get another class feat. There are some very good level 6 class feat, like Ki Blast, which allows you to do an AoE attack using your ki powers, and also Whirling Throw, which is great for a grappling build, as we saw in our previous video. There is also Abundant Step, which is a teleportability. However, right now I'm going to take Wholeness of Body. This allows us to use our ki spells to heal ourselves, basically. It also increases our focus points by 1. Keep in mind that this has ki spells as a prerequisite, so we can only take it thanks to the human natural ambition and the fact that we were able to use it at level 1 to gain ki spells. So what Wholeness of Body does is it gives us 16 hit points, or it allows us to cure a poison or a disease affecting us. This is not that much. It will scale up and become better as it levels up. I think it's a useful ability to have, especially for a frontliner such as ourselves, to get a bit of extra hit points. Speaking of healing, I think this is our healing level, so we don't get the ability just to heal ourselves, but also to heal our animals. And this completes our focus points pool at level 6. We got all 3 of them, and we can choose between doing extra damage, or healing ourselves, or healing our animal companion. The first focus points recharges every time we refocus, so basically at the end of every combat. The other two are more for emergency situations, I would say. At level 6 we get another skill feat. You can pick your favorite here. I took Terrain Stalker to lean in more heavily in the stealthy scouting character role. And I think Rubble would be the more common terrain in your average dungeon. But if you are in a snowy campaign or in a campaign which is in the jungle, of course, take the appropriate terrain. Level 7, we get our first master skill increase, and I'm going to increase acrobatics first. This is because we will be able to take keep up at the next level. We get our general feats, and here for martials, I think toughness is a very safe bet for the extra HP. We get our first path to perfection. We can select a save, we will select will, and this allows us to increase our proficiency in that save and to critically succeed when we just succeed on that save. Critically succeeding on will saving throw sometimes has very beneficial effects, such as making us immune to stuff like fear auras or domination effects, so this seems a very convenient ability to have. And in general, the most scary effects for a martial and a damage dealer are the effects that take away control of your character and perhaps use it against your party. So I think will is a very important save to keep as high as possible. We also get a weapon specialization for the extra damage. At level 8, here I am going to take Ki Blast. This gives us an extra possible use for our key points, although sadly we do not increase any further our key pool, but now we can do AoE damage as a martial character. It is not the most damage in the world, but we can choose to use up to 3 actions to deal 6d6 damage right now in a 60 feet cone, and this damage is resisted on a fortitude saving throw. On a critical failure, you can also push the enemies around, so it's kind of like a Kamehameha light. Again, nice having AoE options for martials. Our archetype feat at level 8 is once again taken, and it is Incredible Beastmaster Companion. This is something you must take if you want to keep your animal companion relevant, and this allows you to choose the Nimble or Savage Animal Companion specialization. For our pets, the Nimble Advance is the most obvious because it prioritizes dexterity over the other stats. This increases the damage the bird deals with the support's action to 2d4 persistent bleed rather than just 1d4, and it also gives them the fly-by attack maneuver. This is a strike and a stride together, with the possibility to strike at any point along the way, so it's technically 2 strides and 1 strike. Again, more action efficiency, and this is great to keep your birds safe if you want to use them as strikers instead of just flankers. Although, if you do this, you will lose the flanking benefits from your birds, so it depends when you want to use this or not. Our skill feat for level 8, as I anticipated, is going to be Keep Up. This is more free actions, more action economy. And when we get knocked down, we can stand up for free without causing opportunity attacks. At level 9, I'm going to start with the Ancestry feat, and we get another amazing feat from the human, which is Multi-Talented. This is technically another class feat, although this can only be an archetype feat. And there is an archetype which matches very well for the monk, and that archetype is the Rogue Dedication. Right now, the Rogue Dedication is just going to give us 2 extra skill training. So we get a skill increase, which we are going to put in stealth, and we can train 2 skills we want. The first one is going to be in thievery, we cannot choose that. And the second, we can choose whatever we want. We are a wisdom character, having access to the medicine action seems useful. We also gain a skill feat, and since we just increased stealth to master, that means we have access to Swift Sneak. This allows us to sneak at full speed instead of half speed. This also gives us surprise attack. We are going to roll stealth for initiative most of the times, as often as we can, and so creatures that haven't acted yet when we attack them are automatically flat-footed to us. And then we get some monk features like Metal Strikes. This makes our unarmed attacks count as Cold Iron and Silver. This is a classic monk feat. So for the purpose of overcoming damage resistance, we have this feature now. And we also get Expert DC in our class spells, which is relevant for effects like Stunning Blow and Ki Blast. At level 10 we get our second ability boost, and it's going to be all the same: Strength, Constitution, Wisdom and Dexterity. We get a class feat, and here I'm going to take Wind Jump. This is another key spell, and this key spell basically gives us a flying speed. It's level 10, it's very early to be able to fly basically at will, and it matches very well with our bat-like archetype, the fact that we are able to basically fly. This is not really flight, although it has a caveat. We must end our turn on solid ground or fall. Although, once we can cast it at 6th level, we can then attempt an acrobatics checks, and that's a skill that we are investing into. And if we succeed, then we can just find perches in mid-air and not fall. Again, this sounds very anime to do. The monk in general is a very anime class. Even if we fall by a bit, we have catfall, we have acrobatics proficiency, so this seems like a very powerful asset in our arsenal of key powers. For our free archetype feats, we get Sneak Attacker, and we get an extra 1d6 damage on all our attacks, as long as we hit a flat-footed enemy, which is something that we are always going to do. We do not get the increase on the number of dice that the rogues get, so it's always going to be just 1d6 extra precision damage, but it's still not a significant increase in our damage per round. We get another skill feat, and I'm going to keep investing into stealth skill feats. This feat is called Foil Senses, and it allows us to avoid notice, sneak, and other things, despite special senses against creatures like Blind Sight, Tremor Sense, and so on. Very powerful feat. At level 11, we get a skill increase, and we are basically playing like rogues at this point. So I think that our third legendary skill is going to be Thievery. So we are going to start investing into it. We get a general feat, and why not take fleet? We are already fast as hell, we might as well be a bit faster. For our second path to perfection, I'm going to choose Fortitude. Again, this allows us to critically succeed on successes on our Fortitude saving throws. This means that we can outright deny damage from effects that target Fortitude. And I think Fortitude is the second next scariest saving throw to make, because if you fail at Fortitude effects, you might die. At level 12, we get a very good action economy feat, which is Stance Savant. You could argue that getting meditative focus right now is good because we have so many focus powers that being able to use more of them every combat is very good. So I think you can pick your favorite here. I took Stance Savant first because, well, it's more action efficiency. We can now enter our Stumbling Stance for free. We also get another free archetype, and I'm going to choose Basic Trickery. And the rogue feat I'm going to take for that is Mobility. So if we want, we can now stride for half our speed, which is probably going to be at this point just the regular speed of a normal creature, and not trigger reactions, including opportunity attacks. So we are basically immune to opportunity attacks if we choose to be. We can also get skill feats, and why not invest a bit into Thievery? So I took Pickpocket here. Now we can steal objects that are closely guarded without penalties. So we might be able to steal stuff from now and then. Level 13, another skill increase. We're going to bring Thievery up to Master. We get Ancestry feat, and this is where we can get Dire Form from Beastskin. This means that right now, when we use our hybrid shape, we can enlarge ourselves. So we are permanently enlarged, we gain extra reach, a little bit of extra damage. Very useful in combat and also very scary to see. We are this horrifying, giant, hulking man-bat hybrid. Despite that, we also get Graceful Mastery. This is an increased proficiency in unarmored defense. And we also get Master Proficiency in unarmored attacks. Level 14 is where I'm going to take Meditative Focus. Extra focus points are nice. We really have a lot we can do with focus points, so getting more of them at the end of every combat is amazing. And the archetype feat, again, the Beastmaster demands its toll, and we need to take Specialized Beastmaster Companion. So this gives us access to one of multiple specializations for our companions. Let's take a look at them. Here they are. These specializations typically give you a bonus to the modifier of one stat, and then an additional effect. In this case, Daredevil seems very useful to increase our survivability. First of all, it denies the flat-footed inflicted by hidden, undetected flanking creatures unless the creature is of a greater level than Animal Companion. Increases the proficiency in acrobatics, which is not very relevant, but the dexterity modifier increase, as well as the proficiency in the unarmored defense increases, are all good to increase our bird's survivability. So this is the first specialization we're going to take. We also get a skill feat. Since we are flying around, I think Aerobatics Mastery is a good pick. Level 15, it's time for our first legendary skill increase, and I'm going to choose Stealth. The legendary feat for Stealth is very good. Ability boosts, as always, strength, constitution, wisdom, and dexterity. For our general feat, I took a fun one. I took Ancestral Paragon in order to be able to take a first level ancestry feat. There are so many good ancestry feats we can take. And I took Critter Shape. This allows us to use pest form to turn into a small bat. So this small bat technically does not have the fly speed yet, which is why you don't necessarily want to take this early on. However, in a couple of levels, we are going to gain the ability to fly ourselves. So I would argue once we get that, probably Critter Shape should allow us to fly while transformed. It technically does not, by raw it does not, so talk with your GM about that, but I think it's not unreasonable if we can fly all the time to be able to gain that attribute when we are in our Critter Shape at high level. Of course, at low level, this would be too powerful. But a reason to take this is to complement our scouting abilities. As I said multiple times in the Druid video, I think Druids make for amazing scouts because they can take unassuming shapes and easily infiltrate heavily guarded regions, as long as they don't expect a Druid to do exactly that, of course. So being able to turn into a bat, bats are frequently found in places like dungeons. So we can be very effective scouts using this feature, as long as, of course, we can actually fly with it later on. If your GM does not allow you to fly with this shape, a backup option would be something like Astrology, which provides you bonuses to skills, although this does have a regional requirement. So if you're not a human which belongs to a specific region, you cannot take this. Keep that in mind at character creation. We get our third path to perfection. This path to perfection is better than the others, and it's actually different. This increases the proficiency for the chosen path to legendary, and it allows us to roll a regular failure when we roll a critical failure, and to take half damage when we roll a failure against an effect that would deal that kind of damage. So damaging effects that target will are maybe not as common as the other two saving throws, but critically failing will saving throw effects, I don't think is something you ever want to do. So I took will here. I think there is a strong argument in taking Constitution as well. So I think one of those two. I'm afraid of my character being mind control, so I prioritize will here. I would rather die than be mind control. Basically, this is what I'm saying. We also get greater weapon specialization as all marshals. At level 16, I didn't feel there were many monk feats that were worth considering. You could take Quivering Palm, which is an insta-kill key spell, but we have so many options with our key spells that I felt like I wasn't going to use this that much. So instead, I took an extra specialized Beastmaster Companion, and this allows to give the Ambusher specialization to our Animal Companion, further increasing the dexterity modifier and giving it the ability to sneak even if they are observed. So if they are stealthy, and they might be, considering their stealth as right now increased to expert, it's going to be a little bit easier for them. For our free archetype feat, I'm going to take a rogue feat instead, which is advanced trickery. And for the rogue feat which I'm given thanks to advanced trickery, I will take opportune backstab. This is an opportunity attack plus. As we saw, our standstill is a bit limited, but this is a lot more reliable. Anytime a creature within our melee reach is hit by a melee attack from one of our allies, this includes our Animal Companion, then we can capitalize on the distraction and make a strike against that creature. So now we are going to be able to make opportunity attacks very reliably, thanks to the combination of our flanking partner, our big reach, and our combination of opportune backstab and standstill. The skill feat, it's the first legendary skill feat, and as I said, it's going to be the stealth legendary skill feat, which is legendary sneak. We can hide in plain sight. Amazing. At level 17, we get another legendary skill increase. There is no legendary skill for acrobatics as usual, and while our catfall becomes better when we are legendary in acrobatics, there is actually a legendary feat for thievery. So I'm going to prioritize that. The ancestry feat is the ancestry feat which gives us a flying speed, and that is animal swiftness. This increases our speed by 5 feet, just more speed increases because we don't have enough of them with this character, and it gives us one of the following speed of our inherent animals. And since we picked a flying animal, we can pick fly. So now we fly at incredibly fast speeds too, and we are enlarged. We are truly the stuff of nightmares. Our unarmed attacks are also adamantine, relevant to overcome damage reductions. I think of objects as well. We get legendary unarmored proficiency just like the champion, so we are very tanky. And we also get higher proficiency in Monk's class DC. Since now we can fly, we no longer need really wind jump. So if you want, you can retrain out of it and get another feat, for example, a different key power. In this case, I'm going to choose Abundant Step, and this allows us to basically teleport up to a distance equal to our speed, which is incredibly high. We also need line of sight, but our one action teleport effect is incredible. It is also framed in a way that it's not technically a teleport effect, it's just we move so fast that we blur across planar boundaries. Again, anime. Level 18, in case you had any doubts that the designers of Pathfinder love anime, you get a key power which is called Key Form, which is basically a Super Saiyan form. And what it does is it adds extra damage to all your strikes, it makes you glowing, it gives you a penalty to saves against emotion effect, but a bonus to saves against all other mental effects. It gives you a flying speed. It's a Super Saiyan form. It's very cool, it's very thematic. However, we have a lot of focus powers and we can already fly. The extra damage is very nice. But there is one thing that I think is a good competitor for Keyform. If the fantasy of your monk becoming Goku is what you're going for, take this feat and never look back. It's amazing. However, for our bat character, it doesn't really fit much. And since we have so many key powers, I think that Meditative Wellspring, to be able to regain all three of them at the start of every combat, is just too good not to take. So I'm going to take that instead. And now every combat we can key strike 3 times, or we can heal ourselves or our animals 3 times. We can do 16d6 AoE blast damage, or we can teleport, and we can mix and match all these things freely. But again, if you want to go Super Saiyan, don't let me stop you. For our free archetype, let's get more rogue feats. There is a level 8 rogue feat, which we can get right now, that has Master in Stealth as a prerequisite. We are legendary in stealth, so we can take it. And it's called Tactical Entry. And guess what? It gives us a free action at the start of the combat. If we roll stealth for initiative, and we have yet to act in the encounter, we get a free movement, which does not trigger any reactions. Keep in mind that at this point, our speed is 60 feet, so our free movement is actually 2 movement actions. So at the start of every combat, we get 2 free actions thanks to Tactical Entry. Actually, make them 3, because we also have Stance Savants. So every combat we start with 3 free actions, and then we can use an action like Key Strikes or Flurry of Blows, which is actually 2 actions. So at this point we are completely degenerate action-wise, and I think that it's going to feel absolutely exhilarating to play such a fast character who does so much with their turn. We get a skill feat, and I was talking a lot about Thievery getting a legendary skill feat. Is it great? I don't know about that. It's certainly very fun because our ability to steal now defies belief. We can literally steal worn items. Although this is not something we're probably going to be able to do in combat. We have to do it slowly and carefully, and it takes 1 minute. But we can literally rob people blind without them realizing. We can steal their underwear without them noticing. So we are thieves. We have invested into it. We are high level. We, I think, deserved a bit of fun with that ability. Our last legendary increase goes to acrobatics. We are now literally immune to full damage. Not that I think this was going to occur much with our ability to fly freely, but you never know. For the general feat, I'm going to take here Canny Acumen. Again, as always, you can respecialize this, retrain this at level 17. So retrain your Ancestral Paragon when it becomes active. This means that we can have all our saving throws at least Master Proficiency, because we can improve our worst saving throw right now, which is our Reflex saving throw, and bring it up to Master. And at level 20, we get our final ability boosts. Wisdom is at 18, so there's no point to buff it further. And we can choose charisma or intelligence. Intelligence gives us an extra skill proficiency. As always, you can take something useful like religion, I don't know, survival, or as always, we can take performance because it's the end of our character and we might as well have some fun with them. Our capstone ability is Golden Body. This is an uncommon ability, but it's level 20, and your DM, come on, they're not going to deny you a feat, an uncommon feat at level 20. If I had players that got to level 20, I would basically shower them with gifts at that point because they've stuck with me so long that they really deserve all the love in the world. But anyway, what does Golden Body do? Your body is perfected. Your strikes are now deadly D12. You gain fast healing 20, a very nice capstone ability. And I think a nice conclusion to our character arc. We were struggling against our bestial nature. We were trying to overcome it. And at the end of our character arc, maybe we realized that the true path to perfection was self-acceptance instead of fighting against ourselves. We can take another rogue feat for our free archetype feat, and we can take a level 10 feat, so it's a capstone feat for our archetype, and that feat is Sneak Savant. When we roll a failure on a sneak action, we get a success instead. So people are never going to be able to spot us. We have to critically fail, basically, to fail at sneaking. But this, together with assurance, means that we are constantly invisible, as you would expect from a man-bat hybrid. We hide in the shadows. People don't see us coming. We just emerge from it and then we murder everyone. And for our last skill feat, really, you can pick your favorites here. There isn't much that impacts the build at this point. I took Tumbling Theft. This allows us to tumble through an enemy and then try and steal something from them as a reaction, with a circumstance bonus. We cannot use this to steal a weapon the enemy is holding, but it's a fun way of stealing stuff. It's a high-level skill feat, which we can access because we have got both proficiency in acrobatics and thievery. So, you know, we can have fun with this action, which not many characters can undertake. And that wraps up the monk build. We are going to see shortly how their damage looks like in the damage projection. So far, what we've seen is this is a character that can do lots of actions in combat. They are supported by an animal companion. They have great mobility and they make for great flankers themselves. So they add a lot of support to the party. They are fast, they are sneaky, and they are also great scouts. With this kind of character, one thing that I think you need to be very careful about is not to get carried away. This huge speed is a double-edged sword if you do not use it carefully. Do not rush into combat head first as soon as the fighting starts. As always, let the enemy come to you. Let the enemy waste their actions so that you can make the most out of your action efficiency. Stay with your party. Do not get out of position. Despite of how high our armor class and survivability is, this is still a team game, and our class assets should not be used to try and outshine our companions and move solo. And I think that this is a bit of a danger of this build because it encourages solo play through scouting and through getting isolated from the rest of the party because of your great mobility. But you should use these assets to complement the rest of your party and their fighting styles. If your fighter is low, it means that they're going to have trouble getting behind the enemy, maybe. You do not have that issue, so you can be the flanker. So this is just to say, be careful the way you use these amazing powers you're giving. So before concluding the build, let's look at how our damage looks like. And here we are at the damage projection. As always, I am assuming we are fighting against an enemy with a high armor class. Our combat routine, in this case, is Flurry of Blows, and we are comparing ourselves with the dreaded double slicing fighter. I am assuming that both us and the fighter are flanking the enemy, so our to-hit chance is higher, but in our case, we also get some bonus damage from sneak attack and backstabbing. So the question that this graph answers is, what is better, Flurry of Blows or double slice? Well, double slice wins damage-wise. Of course, this is not just any double slice, but it's the double slice of a fighter who is dual-wielding picks and is dealing massive damage with the critical hits. They also have better weapon proficiency than we do, so it's no surprise that the damage would be higher. However, this is an unfair comparison. because the fighter is using 2 actions for the double slice. We are using only 1 for flurry. So let us consider that and add a 3rd strike for us. So just a regular strike with a -10 multiple attack penalty, a terrible strike. And what does that look like? Well, all of a sudden, at low level, we start catching up with the fighter, and eventually we can even overcome the fighter at many points of our build, simply by virtue of the fact that 3 attacks deal more damage than 2, even though our attacks are worse, because we have lower proficiency and we have lower damage because our strength is lower than the fighter. But the fact that we can do more of these attacks for the same cost in actions means that our damage is a little bit higher. And what if we don't want to do the 3rd attack? What if we instead command our animal companion, and our animal companion strikes only once, not twice, but maybe they have to position, maybe they help us flanking by positioning. So I'm giving them only 1 strike in this routine, and the damage looks even better. Now we are worse than the fighter, only at level 1, which is where we don't have our animal companion yet. But then we are basically better than them all the way up to very high level, where our animal companion can no longer keep up with just the insane amount of damage the fighter is doing. So this is a very surprising result. A build which chose a stat that gives them more defense than offense is able to compete and outmatch one of the best damage dealers in the game just by virtue of the action economy efficiency. So I think this highlights very well how powerful of an asset the action economy is. Also, because of its versatility. Right now, we are showing a scenario where we are using that action economy and focusing it on damage. But while a double slice is 2 actions that can only be used for damage, our flurry plus something else, that something else can be used for damage as seen here, but it can be used for anything else. Movement, a defensive action like raising a shield, activating some objects on the battlefield like closing a portcullis, or opening a trapdoor, or locking a door, which might be more useful and beneficial in that combat than just dealing damage. We can aid an ally. We can even ready an action, why not? In fact, if you really don't know what to do with your 3rd action, you could make the previous graph look even better. Instead of doing flurry and 3rd attack, you could flurry and ready your 3rd attack at the beginning of the enemy turn, so that your 3rd attack would not suffer from the -10 multiple attack penalty. This will, of course, cost you your reaction. So if you are expecting to trigger standstill or opportune backstab on the following turn, then this isn't really that beneficial. But maybe you're 1v1ing an enemy for whatever reason, and you know you're not going to use your reaction, well, then you can always guarantee you have a use for your reaction thanks to your excellent action economy. The double slicing fighter is not necessarily at its maximum optimization power. They do not have a free archetype. We do, so that certainly gives us an edge when compared to them. But it's very surprising how well we are performing. And it really pleases me to see that the monk can be a competitor and a very competent striker if they choose to be that. They can be a competitor for the fighter and a very good melee striker if they choose to be that. So with these very uplifting thoughts, let us draw our conclusions. Final thoughts. So at this point, we have seen a number of martial characters. We have seen the barbarian, who has very flashy, very boisterous abilities, insane and impressive amounts of damage. And we've seen the fighter, which is incredibly flexible and offers basically limitless customization potential. The monk lacks the flashiness of the barbarian, and it is certainly more focused than the fighter in terms of the fantasy that it can deliver. However, that particular fantasy it delivers excellently, and if you're starved for monk action from D&D 5th edition, then Pathfinder is the game for you, because it is very easy to build an effective and fun monk. And most importantly, being the action economy cheater of a system which is based on action economy, basically guarantees that you're going to be an effective, impactful, and extremely enjoyable character. So I am absolutely delighted to see how well the Monk has been implemented in the system. I cannot recommend it enough as a class to play, and I would say this class on its own is reason enough to introduce somebody to the Pathfinder system. So I'm going to conclude this video with that. I thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.